Biel.
Hello and welcome back to round 5 of the Biel Chess Festival introductory Accentus CHESS960 tournament, and the battle for the 2,000 Swiss franc first prize is probably going to be decided in this round, because we have a matchup between Pentala Hari Krishna and Radoslav Voytasek. They're both rated exactly the same, 27-19 in the FIDE classical rating system, and well, we don't know how good they are at CHESS960, but they're leading the tournament, and there's a half a point advantage for Voytasek, but Hari Krishna has the white pieces. So we already have some, well, a relatively strange position. This particular line, well, was again has been played a lot in 2020, and one of the most successful and common first moves is actually C3. D4 is also popular, but C3 allowing the bishop on B1 to come out, and also the queen on B3 is certainly decent. But instead of that, we've got the two players, well, just developing quietly. H6 by Voytasek will probably be replicated by Hari Krishna sooner or later, because that's about the only way that bishop's going to come out. So indeed, H3 played, and so bishop H2. And when white plays C3, then it will be almost impossible for white to castle unless white takes back with the knight, which looks very, very weird. So right now, you feel as if black's doing quite well out of this position. So yeah, bishop H2 played, and now it's up to black to find good squares for his queen and knight. Certainly knight D7 looks like a perfectly reasonable move here, and I wouldn't be completely sure that the knight on F3 is actually better placed than the knight on D6. So I think Voytasek has judged this reasonably well. Of course, there's not much in it at the moment. Remember to ignore the clocks a bit, but yeah, it's definitely a position that will last for a while. There are no easy tactics. It started with all the pawns protected, so it's a CHESS960 game that it looks like it's going to turn into a positional battle, and we'll see how it goes. I guess white could go E3 and Queen E2 if white really wanted to, and then castle kingside, and that makes a lot of sense. Really a lot of sense, actually. So black could replicate that. It's one of these positions where you could just about copy each other, and it might work okay. So yeah, given that this is not the most entertaining game we've got at the moment, I might actually see if we can do a little better. So Donchenko is doing quite well in this tournament. He's half a point behind Hari Krishna, so we might switch to the Donchenko game. And this one looks a bit more exciting. So in this position, we've got French defense as a starting line, and then knight G3 instead of knight C3. I like it. So we have the Tarrasch variation of the French defense, as it would be played if black started with a king on c8. It's extremely weird here. Already black has the option of grabbing the knight on g3 and grabbing on e4, but of course c5 could also be hanging. So it's quite a messy position, really. It feels as if black's doing okay. I wonder if it's worth playing c4 here with black, or will white just undermine it with b3 and a4? Probably would, despite the king sitting over there. There is a bishop f4 check, which looks really annoying. The king looks stupid on c2. Now we may get a tempo later attacking the bishop with knight d3, but I reckon bishop check and bishop d6 also looks decent. Just developing pieces. So plenty of decent ideas here for Edouard, who's having a very modest tournament. And this is a chance to make up some ground, though. Still 3 rounds left, so we're only just after halfway, but it does look as if Voytasek and Krishna are going to be the ones to catch. Now, a little way down the standings, we have Adams up against Anton. Anton's finally worked his way back to 50% after his horror start. And yeah, now we have a position of the sort that makes you realize why CHESS960 is not universally popular. I know that some of the social media comments here have been quite happy that Biel decided to start with CHESS960, and others that are just tuning out because it's not real chess. And in fact, the big attraction of the Biel Chess Festival this year is, of course, that it is the first time since the candidates tournament that we are going to see top players play classical chess over the board. The fact that they're playing rapid chess over the board or CHESS960 over the board is not so special, given that you could watch you could watch all the Carlsen rapid tournaments if you wanted. You can watch the FIDE Rapid Online Olympiad. And of course, there were also CHESS960 games available, but nothing really significant since the, well, you could almost call it a World Championship. Certainly it was approved as a World Championship, which Wesley So won late last year, crushing Magnus Carlsen in the final. So, yeah, So did remarkably well in that tournament. Here, once again, the players have come up with the a6 bishop a7 idea, trying to put a little bit of pressure on d4. So, well, white can use the bishop on g1 if white wants to go f3 or something like that to guard that pawn on d4. But yeah, f3 doesn't look bad. But the question is, after knight e6, whether you're going to go d5 or not. And that's a really hard decision to block it up. You might have a bit more space, but it does look like black's pieces have some lovely dark squares to jump into. So I wouldn't say either player is doing badly here. Well, you can say that sometimes in CHESS960 on move 4, but not really here. So let's see how we go. Going to the one player that we haven't seen yet, and that is Vincent Keymer. Well, we also haven't seen Noel Studer, the young local who's really having a hard time here. So we'll zip over to their game. They've hardly done more moves than anyone else. In fact, it's remarkably like the Adams game, with a c3 and d4 plan countered by an e5 and f6 plan. However, in this case, black seems to be targeting the e4 pawn rather than the d4 pawn. It certainly doesn't look too bad for black, but it's one of these positions where you're going to find it a little bit hard to castle. It's quite possible, certainly for white, that white may choose to adopt the Fred Reinfeld structure with bishop d3, bishop e3, and then you might have a chance of castling. And I suspect that it's going to be on the king side if white has a chance to do it. In the meantime, black can, of course, play bishop c7 and queen e7. Or yeah, okay, taking on e5 is out of the question. So Studer shouldn't be wasting time even wondering about that. If you take on e5, we take back. If you take again, there's queen g5 check. The only, the only reason I could imagine that you want to take on e5 is to have a go at that e5 pawn with maybe h3 and bishop h2. And that may not be a bad plan, but the bishop on b8 does do a good job defending it, and a knight can come to g6. So I don't think either isolated pawn is particularly weak. But let's go back to the big game after all, with Hari Krishna with white against Radoslav Voytasek, and these two are basically playing for first place. And right now it looks like a normal Hari Krishna game, to be perfectly honest. This Hari Krishna has sort of been known as the most positional of the top Indian players, certainly of the new generation, because I believe Anton can play a little bit of positional chess. But here it's going to be hard to get b5 in, so there's no particular reason for black to panic. And also, of course, if you really want to, you could take on c4 and swap a pair of knights and a pair of bishops. And even if white got b5, it would be rather hard to turn that into anything special. But you don't really want to be defending one of those positions. And right now, I suppose white is thinking about c5 and b5. Of course, when you play c5, the knight will presumably drop into e4 and threaten knight c3, but you can take it and play knight d2, and that certainly seems like it's okay for white. So this is a big think by Voytasek. He just doesn't want to be worse. He could also play b5, or is he worried about us taking on d6 and taking twice on b5? That looks pretty dodgy, actually. There'll be a rook b8, so b5 might be the way to go. The idea of b5 is to answer c5 with knight c4. And then the only way you can undermine that knight really is to get e4 in, but I doubt that's going to be working terrifically well. So fighting back on the queen side. The other problem with b5 could be a knight e5 move, but yeah, knight e5 could be annoying, but I don't see a problem with rook c8 then. Or actually, no, you can take on e5 because c4 is hanging. So we'd have to actually swap before we go knight e5. So b5 played by Voytasek, and he just doesn't want to be even slightly worse in any of these positions. They usually say in these Queen's Gambit positions, especially if white had played cd5 and ed5, it would have been a real Queen's Gambit exchange variation, and they say that the d6 square is the perfect square for your knight in these structures, and this is that close that he'll be pretty happy with that piece on b6. Now, I guess we could take on d6 and play c5 and e4, but it doesn't look very trustworthy. It's hard to believe that that's going to be much at all. So, yeah, it's not that easy here to keep winning chances with black's knight ready to jump in on the c4 square. And of course, when you take after bishop takes, the b4 pawn is a little bit weak, which sort of obliges you to go c5, and then you don't have any real pressure. Maybe you can switch with rook a1 and try to double, but I don't see it working. But maybe that's the best you can do. Bishop takes d6, bishop takes d6, c5, bishop c7, and rook a1. And with the plan of rook a3 and double on the a file, and then finally threaten to exchange on b5, which you can always take back with a c pawn, but then at least the a6 pawn will be a little bit weak. Now, you could take back with the queen, though I don't suppose that really helps. Taking on d6, no, it doesn't, because b5 is hanging. So Hari Krishna probably needs to give up his wonderful bishop on h2, although it's not that wonderful, given that it'll enable his opponent to back rank mate him later if everything disappears from the back rank. But so bishop d6, c5, rook a1, very, very small advantage. And maybe it's no advantage. Maybe black plays e5 very fast, and you probably have to take everything off. Because if you let black play e4, you could well turn out to be very vulnerable on the king side. So maybe not that simple. We could take on d6 and take on b5, let you take on b4, and that will be a draw. But that's not good enough for Hare Krishna, of course. So, yeah, b5 is a good forcing move. Rather than be slightly worse, he's going for absolutely equal. And the only way I can see to avoid absolutely equal is take on d6 and c5, but it's quite possible that black may finish up with a slight advantage. Remember, in some of these endgames, if you give up your dark squared bishop, if a black bishop ever turns up on c3 or somewhere like that, it could take a whole pawn chain if white's not careful. So black breaking with e5 would be unfortunate. Anything else? Not really. 95, 95, and then knight takes c4, and you've gained nothing, I think. So very tough decision here for Hare Krishna, but my guess is he's going to take on d6, take on b5, and it's going to finish as a draw. So maybe I should move on to another game. Let's have a look at Adams again. So the Adams game is an endgame against Anton, and I wouldn't say this is anything special for white despite the bishops, because the d4 pawn is a real hassle. Now, if knight e6, I wonder, I'd probably have to go knight c2 then, because d5, the pawn on d5 could be very weak very quickly after knight f4. So here, Anton is absolutely okay. It's not the most exciting position in the world, but okay. The most exciting position in the world, I suspect, is Donchenko against Edouard. That's certainly the only one where there's a lot of action straight out of this line, and black's still a bit undeveloped, but he's gone for real action. So white grabbed a pawn on h5, and black has got it back, and now black is targeting that e5 pawn. So now if you take back with the pawn on e5, then knight d7, and it protects c5, and it also attacks e5. And also you can't really take on c5 either because of e4. So knight e5, it looks it looks much better because the rook on h5 is hanging. So queen g5 is a nice trick, threatening f3 check, but we can just pull back with our knight to f3 now if we want to. And that feels like black will be well under control then. So knight f3, you don't allow bishop takes e5. Yep, knight f3 played. Presumably the queen will go back somewhere, and then maybe... Now we still can't take on c5 without allowing e5. So queen f6 looks logical. Queen g4 played. That really looks awkward. Apart from the fact that it pins that knight to some extent, it feels as if we should have bishop f2 and rook g1 very quickly, but maybe black is planning rook h3. Right now the e6 pawn could also be a weakness, so white will be looking at tactics. Of course, if you really want to, you could play bishop c2 and bishop d1 after rook h3, and that would probably be absolutely fine. But white's probably looking for something a lot more active. I don't mind h3, but I can't actually make it work. Take. I need to get castled really fast then. So bishop c2 and castles queenside. Maybe I'm not fast enough. So bishop c2 played. So he's happy with bishop d1 if necessary. And if it doesn't happen that way, he's going to play castles queenside, which will just bring the rook to d1. So there's no queen g2 or anything tricky like that. You can play knight d7 here, but the e6 pawn remains fairly weak. So I'm guessing that a move like knight d6 could be played. Although that allows knight e5. Oh, no, it doesn't. The queen's, it's still a pin. So knight d6 to c4, perhaps? Or should we just go bishop d6 and castle queenside ourselves? Also makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, very, very messy position here. White's a pawn down, but you feel as if the central pressure will probably be worth it. The two knights on the back rank don't make a good impression. So white needs to be quick. Somehow bishop f2 and rook g1 and rook g8 or that sort of thing. And then I can well imagine a big advantage for white. But for the moment, it's black's move, and black needs to find something to do. Well, bishop d6 and castles queenside guards the knight on f8, and also, but it does allow pawn takes pawn on c5, but is that really scary? Bishop c7, and then can we go e5 anyway? Maybe. Yeah, so, but if you're worried about that, go start with bishop c7 and castle queenside, and same sort of thing applies. You could take on d4 first, but I guess would a bishop take or knight takes is possible, but I think after the queens come off and we get e5 in, then black's extra pawn is really worth a lot. So that's not really a viable option. So very, very unclear, and yeah, we should go back to the Hare Krishna game, because that is the big game of the round. And in fact, he did take on d6, he did play c5, and he did follow with e4 rather than rook a1 or anything like that. So Hare Krishna's trying to preempt e5. Now, it may be possible to play e5 here, but there are moves like knight g3, which are very annoying. And then even knight c3 could be good with d5 ideas. So you could be walking into a pin here if you play e5 immediately. Black can, of course, consider knight f6 to go to d5, but I presume white will swap off one of them and then switch to the a file and try to get pressure down there by doubling on the a file. So it's still a little bit better for Hare Krishna, and he's found the only way to keep the game going, really. And yeah, okay, next, well, unless the d4 pawn is starting to come under attack, which I don't think it will, white's next move will be rook a1, and then rook a2 or rook a3, and so on. And if black tries a5, usually we can just take on b5, and that should work okay, and leave a weak b5 pawn. So black may choose to put a rook on b8 to take on a4 at some point, but it's hard to believe it's much good. So Voytasek is now having a long think, remembering the time limit, 15 minutes and 5 seconds a move. So it's definitely not a simple sort of rapid game. You're not getting your 10 seconds a move, which you often get when you get 25 minutes, but it's not as bad as 2 seconds a move, which you often get with blitz. So here, Hare Krishna with the pressure, and Voytasek, well, he's a very active player, so he does want to break out here. Yeah, if he could get away with taking on a4 and playing a5 fast, he would, but my guess is it'll just allow b5. And of course, if he goes rook b8 immediately, then then rook a1. Okay, so the guy's thinking about e5. His queen's protected. Presumably, Hare Krishna will just play rook e1 and say, well, if you want to play it, you're still going to be in a pin. The other possibility here is knight c3 in order to play d5 after e5, but I think, first of all, knight f6 would be a good answer to that, and secondly, we may be able to play e5, e4, though that looks pretty risky. So rook fe1 is just a natural move that you could play immediately. And maybe Hari Krishna's looking for better. But yeah, I don't want the black knight to come to f6 and d5, so I want to keep my knight on e4 for as long as possible. Rook d1 played. So after e5, he's looking to put a knight in on d6 sooner or later, which is not silly. And it also gets Voytasek to spend more time worrying about whether e5 is really playable or not. And do you start it with f5? So we could start with f5 and then play e5. But if you've played knight c3, then we'll definitely have d5 to come. And that looks like white will be better. Remember, the b5 pawn could also be a bit weak. If you take on a4, we're definitely going rook a1, and that looks absolutely fine. And if a5, b5, so that's good. So all in all, yeah, a little bit better for Hari Krishna. Probably nothing that would work in a classical game, but all in all, it's certainly very, very difficult. Okay, f5 played. So the knight c3, I wonder if he's just going to go knight f6 and try and go knight d5. And the knight is very annoying on d5. So let's see, if knight c3, which looks natural, then knight f6, knight e5 perhaps. But after knight e5, I guess we could just take it and then play knight d5 anyway. And that doesn't look like too much for white at all. So rook a1 plays. So his idea is after knight d5, he's going to take it and say he's slightly better. And he might be. There's no e5 anymore. Or is there? Take. No, because take, and rook d6, and it's going to be pretty horrible for black. So, well, his idea was knight d5. If we take it, he takes, we swap queens, play rook a2, and just get ready for doubling the rooks and then taking on b5. And it is a hard plan to meet. So white's got lots of spare moves here. White can play rook a2 and just get ready for the threat of doubling the rooks. You always double before you swap as a general rule. Of course, there are exceptions. So we'll we might just go back to Donchenko's game because that was really a lot of fun. Apologies if I'm missing out on Studer. Apologies to the local fans. But yeah, you can't get much more fun than this. Have a look at that. So white did bring the bishop back to d1, and after rook h3, but eventually he took on c5 and let black start moving with e5. And now he's completely relying on tactics. So after knight f6, his knight on d4 has to go somewhere. You could take on b7, but I presume the plan is just to take back with the queen. King takes would allow queen b5 check, which would be a bit disastrous. So where is that? Where can that knight go? If it goes to f3, oh, queen b5. So let's see, what's the trick? Pawn takes knight. It's going to involve a bishop g4 check, I reckon, at some point. So pawn takes, queen takes. Bishop g4 check and queen e8. I still don't see the mate, though. So that's a little bit strange. So let's see. Pawn takes knight. We can... I reckon he's just planning to take back with the bishop. Threaten the knight on f6. And if the knight moves, then you've got bishop g4 check. So you have to pull back with something like rook h6. And then we'll have queen e8 by just taking on f6. Whether that's mate or not is another question. But very creative by Donchenko. And certainly with both players short of time, this is going to be really tricky. Is there anything else you could do, like A6? Or doesn't look good, but you never know. A6, take. There's a Queen C5 check as well. So that is annoying as well. Queen C5 check after pawn takes, and that the knight on F8 is in trouble. So black has to be careful. Very hard to protect everything actually right now. So pawn takes, Queen C5. You know, in addition to all the other ideas. So very, very tricky. And Edouard is very, very short of time now. Maybe you just can't find a good move. Has he got any counter-attacking ideas? There's no rook c3s. So he has taken. So is he going to go for the simple method? He is. Takes. Queen takes. Queen c5. King will presumably go to d7 to make sure it's not taken with check. And queen takes. So you could play bishop e5 then, but it doesn't seem to help much. Is there anything better than queen takes knight? You do have bishop a4 check to start with if you want. King e6. And then queen takes knight anyway. I don't think it changes things very much at all. So Donchenko's got a bit of time though. So he can choose. If bishop a4 check wins, you play it. Otherwise, you just take on f8 and keep the bishop check in reserve. Because the advantage of having the king on d7 is you can always play queen f7 and swap queens in a lot of positions. So remembering that white started a pawn down, so after queen takes f8, you could also take on c3, threatening mate on b2, which is also a bit tricky. b2 and d2. So nothing is as easy as it looks, actually. Bishop takes d4 looks nice. The knights could coordinate then, knight h7 or something along those lines. But that does look very awkward. So he did take on c3. So Edouard is very brave. So queen f7 now, I guess we have to go back to c8 to avoid losing our knight with check. But it just seems to be okay. Sure, there's a perpetual. Probably a perpetual, but that's not anything too worrying. So just to let you know, Adams is still defending that that endgame. Maybe we should have a quick look at the Studer game on against Vincent Keymer, because it's another endgame though. And well, right now white's just castled queenside. Black did that a long time ago, and just at the moment it looks as if g2 is not falling. It looked really dodgy for a while, but I can't see a clear way to get through here. You've got knight e2 checks, but it doesn't seem to work. And in fact, Keymer pulls his head in, plays bishop a6, and well, pawns are equal now, and white's getting ready to perhaps play pushing pawns on the queen side. Well, black's just started on the other flank. So g3 says to the knight go away, but it also creates a target for the h-pawn. So I don't think black minds that. And now is h4 really going to be played? No, bishop d3. Feels like black is a bit better now with h4. It'll either get the f4 square for the knight. Yep. Now if you play g4, we're going to go g5 and knight f4. You could play knight b4, but we can just swap once. And king c7, there is a knight a6 check, but not really deadly. So So king c7. Is he really going to go knight a6 check and then knight back to b4? He did. Now knight c5. e4 is a problem. g3 is a problem. This is really what Studer needed to avoid. And Keymer is starting to take control here. You don't have time to keep the h-file closed. Certainly, knight takes e4 is not an immediate threat. But now takes. And, well, rook h3 looks all right. If we have to go rook e3, then the 7th rank is black's. Maybe knight c2 is playable, but it doesn't look great. So do we go rook g2 here? It's possible. No easy way to attack the e4 pawn, unfortunately. b5 is directed against b4. So you go knight a4 check, and if the king comes up, then the knight can't move. So I presume the king's going to go back after knight check, but then we have, king goes up. So if the knight moves its mate, we can also go knight b6 if we want, and go into c4, which could be really nasty. And he's played it. And are you really going to go knight a3 here? He will. Oh dear. So rook g2 looks like a very decent move here. c4 loses a pawn. It might be the best chance, but rook d2 played to avoid any counterplay. Fair enough. And if g4, we can go back to g2. So yeah, white is running out of ideas. Knight here. I wouldn't be surprised if knight c4 is pretty good here. The knight ending looks rather good, but he went back. And now perhaps king c7 so that there's no rook invasion. Knight a4, knight b6 again. Is this? Yeah, king c7 will be played. I trust Keymer to win this position. Studer is not in great shape. He's lost every game up to now. So just a note that Krishna and Voytasek have drawn. So we'd better go back to the very exciting Edouard game and see how this one's coming along. Oh, but it is a perpetual check. Okay, the variation we saw with queen check, king going back to c8, and queen check on the back rank again. So there's not too much left. Mickey Adams held a draw as well. So the only game still going is the one we're about to go back to, and that is Studer, but it should be all over. As long as we avoid a quick knight d5 check, it's not even a threat. Everything's protected. So time to go. I don't know. I thought g6 and f5 was pretty good, but okay. So c4's been played. You didn't have to take that, but it doesn't hurt, I guess. And it's time to push the g pawn as far and as fast as you can do. So he's getting a rook on the 7th, but it will not be a perpetual. Oh, he swapped off rooks. Okay, and Studer will resign. He can't even get his king across. Well, the pawns are self-protecting. So knight d6, and wherever the knight moves, there'll be an f5, and it will be game over. So Studer, I think, has resigned. No, he has not resigned yet, but he's certainly thinking about it. And he made a move. This looks extraordinarily optimistic. And it is. And now he's resigned. So Studer walks away, grabs his jacket, looks pretty disappointed. 0 out of 5. Vincent Keymer moves up. He is now equal in second place with Pentala Krishna, but they are trailing Radoslav Voytasek. So the Pole, former second of Vishwanathan Anand for many years, now a strong player in his own right, got into the top 20 only a few years ago, is in the lead by half a point. 2 rounds to go. Should be very interesting. So I think we'll take a break and let them clean the pieces, and I'll see you all in time for the next round. Thank you.
do some more again? the floor again.
Welcome back to the Biel Chess Festival, the first tournament of the festival, and it is the sixth penultimate round of the CHESS960 tournament. For those of you who don't know, CHESS960 is the form of chess developed, well, promoted by Bobby Fischer in the 1990s, even though people had similar ideas. It also is known as Fischer random chess. The pieces are shuffled on the first rank. Both players have symmetrical positions, and there are 960 possible positions because the king must be in the middle of the rooks and enabled to castle, and the bishops must be on opposite colors and so on. So there's a number of reasons why there's not a crazy number of possible positions. In fact, all 960 positions have been numbered, and those numbers well, have enabled some sort of chess theory to develop, which is a bit sad in a way, because CHESS960 was supposed to avoid chess theory, and computers can play CHESS960 as well. So anyway, we will start with the Michael Adams game against Noel Studer. Poor old Studer has so far lost his first 5 games. Adams hasn't had a great tournament either, and the position we have with the 2 bishops in the corner has occurred quite a lot in 2020 in online tournaments, and G3 is almost invariably played, either F4 or G3, and here both of them decided they needed both moves, and simply they're opening up for the bishops. So they're active. B4, however, is rather stranger, but the idea is to get that knight out of A1 to B3. You could have played knight B3 immediately, but White is thinking of putting a knight on C5 because that B7 pawn could be a little bit weak. Unfortunately, however, the D5 is always or even C6 is a blocking move. So Adams is a bit more ambitious than Studer. Studer's just getting his pieces out. Adams is looking for a bit more space. And yeah, okay. So this is something that has already been just about replicated on every board, believe it or not. Everyone has decided they wanted G3 and F4 or G6 and F5. Well, and the only one to play B4 has been Adams. Normally both players brought their knights out to B3 and B6. So there's this extra tempo now that black has because of white's B4. But can you really use it? If you play knight C4 or knight A4, I presume there's a very simple move C3. And well, I don't know if you have to go back later. It's hard to say. So the other question is what to do with the other pieces. Both players are likely to play D6 and D3, and that will cut that knight on B6 and the other one on B3 out of the game a bit. It's hard to know. The knight on E8 will probably go to F6, but where it goes from there is hard to say. And at any moment, by the way, white could castle on the queen side just by exchanging the positions of the rook and the king. It's weird, but that's what CHESS960 castling is all about. It wouldn't actually help that much, to be honest. The king is not really a great help in guarding B7, and you still haven't solved the problem with your queen. So it could be that a C6 and queen D6 could happen too, but again, I'm a little nervous about my B7 pawn. And that's perhaps why Adams decided to push the B pawn first. Studer is having a long think, so he played C6 in the end. So let's just try and see how our tournament leader is going, and we'll move over to the Voytasek. And second again, Voytasek played Krishna, and then through that draw, Keymer was able to catch up. And if it looks familiar, it's because it is. That white's played knight D3 and black just played D6, and that keeps those knights well under control. So at some point, I guess white is going to play C3 round here. It could well be that black is already doing quite well. I don't completely trust those knights on B3 and on D3. But we could sometimes play C5, and could be just annoying. Of course, you'll have knight A5 then. He did it immediately. He wants to provoke C6. And I wonder if the Adams plan of B4, B5 might be annoying after C6. Not very annoying, but just certainly playable. There's also an idea of playing bishop D5 here. And I wonder if he'll go for that. It's just taking the best bishop on the board off the board. It does. At first, I thought it was sacrificing a pawn after bishop takes B6, but you just take on H1, bishop C7, queen C7, and the knight on A5 is hanging. By the way, if you wish I was moving around the pieces, I have to say I wish I was moving around the pieces myself, but unfortunately for CHESS960, the technology that's being used at the Biel Festival is not quite good enough for an analysis board for this style of game, and therefore I can only deal with the position in front and talk you through the possible variations. So I won't be going too deeply in any of this. I just think I should move to the Adams game now, because by going to an idea that I thought should be played in Keymer's game. So Keymer's thinking about bishop to D5. In the Adams against Studer game, Adams has already played bishop to D4. So it's remarkably similar. In fact, all the games are remarkably similar. Now, you shouldn't be too scared about swapping on d4 if you want to, because e6 is not weak. After knight takes, there's no threat of knight e6 check because there is a bishop sitting on g8 very effectively. So that is not a problem. There is a possibility here of playing e5, but I don't really trust it, because we can take once and play bishop c5, and that seems to leave that rook rather awkwardly placed. Now, maybe it's nothing. Oh, he's played it. So Studer is confident. One thing about Studer in this tournament, he may not have scored a lot of points, but he's had a lot of decent positions. And he hasn't been scared to just take the center and see what happens from there. So take, bishop c5, rook f6, I guess. And maybe that's okay. And if we take, it helps the black queen get out, let alone the knight on e8 might also get out a bit. So it's conceivable we should pull our head in here and just do something like bishop a1 and played. So Adams has decided, okay, things haven't gone completely right, but at least I'll make sure that the queen doesn't get out of its box. So here, queen c7 looks logical. We can't play e4 just yet because of bishop takes h8, but we will be able to reasonably soon. Queen c7 and then bishop g7, for example. I'd like to go bishop b6, but I'm just not happy with knight g5. Now, maybe that's nothing after bishop back to g8, but I'd rather not give white that sort of option. Yeah, it's hard to see anyone castling here for a while, I must admit, but Adams at least has the option of castling on both sides. He could jump his king over to g1 here if he wanted, or he could jump it to c1 and the rook would jump over the king. So that one is, well, not super exciting, but the one I haven't looked at yet, the Edouard game, and that is with g3 and f4 and all that sort of thing, and both players put their knights on b3 and b6. But at some point, white got a knight on c4 and swapped on b6. And although there's some pressure on b6, it also has helped the queen get out. So we've just had an exchange in the center. And Hare Krishna had better have an idea, because right now, allowing those mobile pawns seems a bit strange. So c5 played. That means if e5, we can at least go knight d5 and maybe knight b4. Which makes sense. Not that c5 threatens anything, but it does free up the black queen to go to nasty squares like a4. And yeah, I guess e4 is reasonably well protected, but there's no castling yet for either player. I don't really want to castle queenside with white because c4, c3 could be very nasty. And I don't think I want to go kingside, but at least it's an option. Again, if I go bishop e3, then there's knight g4 and life isn't so easy. So I wonder how black should proceed, assuming white doesn't push his pawns. e5 is so tempting, but after knight d5, I just don't see where you're going. So difficult position to play, probably the most difficult of the ones we've got. So black is not threatening anything. I mean, c5, c4, c3 at the moment is not a threat, and it would just force the knight to d4, and it could even go to b5 in some lines. So it's got to be sort of creeping moves like queen a4, because white can't go queen c2 without losing the a2 pawn. And then the b3 knight will be hanging, because remember there's a bishop back on g8. This is one of the trickiest sort of positions to play, because the bishops are out of play for a while, and then they can suddenly jump out from nowhere. You don't normally have a bishop sitting on g8. It's why people hide their bishops on h7 or a7, so that they can jump out when their opponent's not looking. And here, this is a position I don't think Edouard should spend too much time here, though. He did play e5. Okay, so if knight d5, can you castle queenside maybe? And then, but then knight b4 again. And there's no e6, and d7 doesn't look so weak, but a2 does. So he's got to go knight d5. It's the most active square on the board. And Hare Krishna, in fact, does that. So the top seed really needs to win this one if he's to have any chance to win this tournament. In the last round, he's got to play against Anton, which is not so easy. And Voytasek, his main rival, gets to play Studer, who hasn't done too well so far. So knight d2 played. And the idea, I guess, is knight e4 or knight c4. But also we can now play a3 and keep the knight out of b4. So right now I reckon knight b4 looks very tempting, but I'm not sure what it does after a3. You can go bishop a2, but we'll just go queen e4. On bishop d5 then. So bishop a2, we've got to go queen a1. So he's played it. Okay, so a3, he really is going to go bishop a2. Knight a2 is possible, but I don't see an answer after rook c2. So you pretty well have to go. Oh no, you've got knights. Yeah, you have to go a3. It's a triple attack on that a2 pawn. Is there anything dramatic on the d file? It doesn't look it. The one good thing from White's point of view is that the bishop on h8 is certainly shut out of the game. So a3 is necessary. So bishop a2, queen a1, and bishop back to d5 perhaps. Or do you have a better square like bishop e6? Could be very nasty too. Planning to go to f5. Not game over, but could be good. Okay, so Hare Krishna is on his way, I reckon. We'll now zip over to the Adams game and just see what's going on there. He's playing. So he's attacking that rook on f8. He's also protecting his pawn on a5, and e5 is still really dodgy. So I guess we could go rook f7, but it looks horrible. There's also an idea of queen c5 to pressure the e5 pawn as well as the a7 pawn. Maybe a7's not that relevant, but yeah, right now what happened to Studer so often is his position's just unstable. It looks like he's got a big pawn center, but somehow it's very difficult to maintain. Wonder if you should go c5 here. Looks like it leaves holes behind, but the queen could go to a4, I suppose. At least you've taken a bit of pressure off. It's still really hard to guard e5. The knight on e8 can't move because the e5 pawn will be under attack. So yeah, it's c5 opens up for the bishop on h1, but you might have to do it, and he has done it. So that is a pity, and Adams does seem to be on the road to inflicting another loss for Donchenko. Okay, let's see how the battle between first and second is going. Voytasek is playing against Keymer, and Oh, both players have been very aggressive. So white played c5 here, and after knight d5, there's no big sacrifice on c6, which perhaps Voytasek was relying on, and the a5 knight is under attack. So after knight takes, we can choose whether bishop takes or knight takes. I think knight takes is probably better because it sets up a2 problems after knight b4. And remember that knight on a5 is in trouble. Now maybe after knight d5 we can go b4, but so he played bishop takes. He wants those pieces off the board. And he will, well, he can even take with the pawn here to try to win a pawn, but it looks unnecessary. Knight takes simply looks healthier. But he's looking at it. So pawn takes, we play b4. And we could jump in with knight e4, but it's not, you could take on d6 and it's not working that well. So I think, yeah, play healthy chess and worry about the tactics later. Keymer is a bit behind on the clock, mind you, but not fatally. So I might quickly bring you back to the Adams game because we've just had a nice little tactic by Adams, which looks like it's going to be decisive against Studer. So if we go all the way back, and there was a move, bishop takes e5 just now. The queen's gone to a5, but after bishop takes e5, if queen takes e5, we just take with the knight, and we're going to finish a pawn up. And if bishop takes queen, we take the queen with check and then take back. And again, have we borrowed a pawn, or has black? Oh no, black just took yeah. Well, we would have borrowed a pawn, but black just took a pawn back on a5. So there's a lot of weaknesses around here in the black position, b7 in particular. But of course, a2 is a bit of a problem. How do we break through here? If bishop takes f6, I presume you take back with the knight. And although it's a nasty pin, it's hard to go further. So yeah, I don't quite see a knockout. But right now there's no big threat. So we could start with g4 perhaps. And the idea would be to open up the f file to get at that bishop on f6. And of course, if bishop e5, knight e5, we've gained. Oh no, sorry, you can't even do that. Oh, but you can take the queen. My apologies. I have to take on f6 first, and then play g4, and that doesn't look too bad. In fact, it looks pretty good. The pin is still annoying, and we're just going to take on f5, and that pawn will be another weakness. Sure, we'll lose a2, but I don't see any real threats after queen takes a2 unless white castles queenside and does. Allows some sort of mate on a1. So, yeah, Studer's position is pretty shaky. Obviously, Adams would rather not develop to black, but in the end he decided to take. So if you take with a rook, then at least g4 is not such a problem because you might be able to go king running away somewhere, but exactly where is a big question. Took with the knight, so I think g4 is the go. Because if queen a4 or something like that, you can just take on f5. And that looks pretty good. So that's extra pressure. And if you take the pawn on g4, then I think knight e5 is pretty good. So yeah, I think it's a problem. It's a real problem here after g4. So, okay, we think Studer is in trouble. And there's one game we haven't even... So that's got unsafe kings. It's got pieces all over the place, and they've actually got down to a position where material is equal, and there is a bishop sitting on, oh, not quite equal. There's a bishop sitting on h8 that's going to have trouble getting out. White cannot castle. That rook on h1 is a bit misleading. It just took something. So in fact, after a3, White, where we looked at, there was a bishop a2, but White did squirm out. Now, the real question here is whether White can make his king safe. Looks like he might be castling by hand here with king f2, but that would allow bishop e5, so that wouldn't be such a bright idea. So in fact, queen a1 check is a really good move here. Queen a1 check if king f2, queen takes e5. And, yep, played. And so it's actually forced to play queen d1, but then we swap and take on e5, or even take on e5. Oh, no, f1's protected. No, we can't do that. So queen d1 played. And now, you would think queen takes and d6 is going to lead to something good. And that should be two connected pawns. I'd rather go d6 than d5 because then I might never get my bishop out. So as it is, you can't just go knight f3 or something like that. You're in pins all over the place. You could play knight e4 to try and hit the pawn on c5, but a simple move like king d7 and king c6 looks like it'll work pretty well. So takes. Yeah, White's just a bit too slow here. Knight e4. So our king comes up, and White's rook is going to try and come to the a file or somewhere like that and cause some problems, but I just don't see it. So king d7, bishop d4, d5. So king e2 played. Rook d1 is not a problem because of bishop d4, and rook a1 is not a problem because the bishop takes rook, and that leads me to suggest rook b8 here to cover the open file. And played. And I must admit, Edouard is in significant time trouble here as well. He's playing a little bit more than his 5-second increments, but he's got all sorts of problems. So rook d1, give a check first, and then bishop d4. Maybe with White, you should start trying to confuse things, h4, knight g5 or something like that, but it's all very, very slow, and it's not going to work. So still no move, but Hare Krishna is going to win, and that leads to the question of whether Mr. Voytasek will also win and stay ahead. And he is up against Mr. Keymer. So we shall see with how the equal top seed is going. Better for Keymer, maybe significantly better, because Keymer can play d5 round here, and he's certainly got the better bishop. I'm not sure about his king, but White's knight is nowhere near the e5 or c5 squares, so giving away those black squares is not such a problem. Okay, b3 at least restrains that knight on b6, but I think d5 and queen g7 or something like that just feels good. Rook e8 doesn't look bad, of course. I don't really want to castle kingside, but I could. It just seems a bit slow to castle kingside round here. No, Keymer should start getting aggressive. d5. The knight simply doesn't have good squares. If the bishop could turn up on c5, the white bishop, maybe that would be okay, but it's hard to see that happening. And yeah, it's the knight on e3 is extremely poorly placed, whereas the other one can go to d7 and find some new squares on f6 and e4, for example. So castle's kingside was played. It may encourage white to go a4 here, you know, because you're setting up a little queen a2 check trick if you grab the pawn on a4. And g4 played, so he's just going for the big attack. It really looks untrustworthy. Knight takes. So he's thinking about knight h6 check, but honestly, I could just go h5 if I wanted. Oh, no, I couldn't. Queen g6 check. So f5 is the problem. So white wants to go f5 at some point. Now, we could start with bishop g7 just to keep our king safe, and that makes a lot of sense. But remember, we need to keep c6 protected as well, and that's not quite so simple. So white's plan is a very quick f5. Now, remember, of course, after f5, you're not threatening anything because there's a pin on the rook on f1, but that pin won't last forever. So Voytasek has found a bit of counterplay from nowhere, but I still don't believe that his position's all that great. Still, he's actually opened some lines, which makes the black castle king not feel so great. Queen d7. So he doesn't care about knight h6 check. He wants to play king g7 and just take it, which is pretty ambitious, but it might be possible. Unfortunately, f5 can now be played. And then the question is, what can black do with that pin just for a move after f5? Is there anything that we can play, like bishop g7 or something along those lines, that might make him regret f5? After bishop g7, we could certainly then go e4, but e4 looks really dodgy. So f5 played. I think he's going to go bishop g7. And played. So no knight h6 check now. Sure, you can go knight e3 if you want. But, well, I'm not sure exactly how to play against knight e3, but it doesn't look very convincing. e4, boom. Okay, so d5 looks like it's going to blow everything apart. I'm a little bit scared about bishop c5, but if I have to sacrifice the exchange, I might do that. And I might just be able to play rook f7. So I like d5. Not that we're threatening to take on e4 necessarily, but the white king is... remember, the white king can also go castle and queenside still by swapping with a rook. Not that that looks like a really attractive option. So Keymer is hitting back and hitting back well. The other bonus of d5 is it might turn the knight on b6 into a good piece at some point. Might be able to come to d5 sooner or later. And of course, that king on d1 is looking a little bit dodgy. Now, there's no way white wants to castle kingside. I mean, you could play bishop takes on b6 and castle kingside, but it doesn't look safe at all. So difficult times for the tournament leader. And it looked like Keymer got a comfortable position out of the opening. And, well, g4, I must admit, it looked attractive, but I'm not sure this is working terribly well. So we can still go rook f7 if we want. And maybe we should. But he wants to give the exchange. Takes on e4. My guess is white is just going to take back. No. So takes here. Now if we take with the rook, you can't take on e4, I think, because we take on f5 and win a piece back. No tricky checks or anything. Although c6 is hanging, so it could be two pieces for a rook. But queen e4's got to be played. Queen c6, we don't have to... Oh no, queen c6, yeah, it's annoying. So, I think queen e4 is still a mess. Rook d8 doesn't help much. Knight d5 could be interesting. Could be very interesting with tricky checks on c3. Knight d5 is still can't go queen e6 check. So knight d5 looks like what we want to play. But he took here. Okay, so he's getting 2 bits for a rook, but I'm not sure that it's all that great. One of the things about 2 bits for a rook is you really need other pieces to help. With only 2 pieces against a sole rook, the rook doesn't need as much play. So as long as white takes the rooks off here, can start attacking pawns on a7 or b5, somewhere like that. Now maybe black's got a bishop d6. Oh, he's keeping the pawns on. Or is he winning that pawn? If we can get our knight to e5, then you'll never get that pawn. But he didn't play knight d7, he went rook f4. Okay, is bishop d4 good? No? Okay, he's still going for that pawn. And he's got it, unfortunately. And now white's right in the game. So, take, and this is the sort of ending black will not enjoy. No potential passed pawns, a d pawn that you don't have to worry about for a while, but it could be annoying, so we can hassle that h pawn, for example, if we want. And he did. Now maybe rook h3. He's going to swap pawns off, so Voytasek is going for the draw here. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets it very, very easily, actually. King e6, yeah, your problem is going to be take, and rook b4. Then his plan is knight c6, which is sort of decent. But, and if rook takes pawn, knight d4 check. But we're not obliged to do that. Rook, probably rook, yeah, rook b4, knight c6, rook check. No, he's played d4, so he wants his king on d3. And I assume all those pawn endings are not going to be anything special. And now he's got rook h5 when he needs it. The pawn endings are definitely not anything special. White may be playing for a win here, because rook h5, okay, so knight d5 is a good move here, stopping rook h5. But it doesn't mean that you can't go rook h3 and try and come in with g3, rook g3 and so on. But at least he might get his king to d5. Still there's, okay, so it looks like Keymer is deciding to make a draw here, and it is a draw. So Voytasek hangs on, and that means that it's up to Hari Krishna to convert his extra pawn. So let's have a look at the Hari Krishna. And he really should have won this one. The Hari Krishna game, he's still got his connected pawns, but gee, he's given his opponent a lot of counterplay with that H pawn. Now, he's slowed it down a lot. I must admit, the bishop does sort of dominate the knight. The question is whether we can now go knight c3 and rook c8 check and start to pick up material, perhaps. Or is rook c8 check a move anyway? Probably not. Probably rook c8 check can be answered by king d5. So, yeah, it's. I should just let you know that we've had some results. Mickey Adams did in fact beat Noel Studer, and David Anton drew with Alex Donchenko. So no change for those two. And yeah, it's still no move here from Edouard. I think he's trying to make rook c8 check work, but I think king d5. And if knight c3, just keep going up. Instead, he played bishop d4 after knight c3. Oh, he played knight c3, bishop d4. So rook check is not going to help. Knight e2, maybe he's going to put the bishop on e5 and stop the knight from ever going forward. And he has. So certainly that knight is well under control. There are a lot of rook checks, but my guess is we can bring our king in pretty well. So king d5, at least that slowed those pawns down. King d2, so there's no check. And now, can we just take on h5? It looks like it's a good move. No tricks So rook takes h5. We can go back to h2 or h3 later, and it looks like Hari Krishna may be tying for first place as a result here. So king e3, that does allow, or did allow c3 and king c4, but he's pushed the king back where it can go to c2 now if c3 check. So it's not so easy. We do have king e4 here if we want to go d5. And I guess after king e4, there will be a rook e8 move played. So that, oh no, but even that, king e4, rook e8, is, d5 is still playable. There is no knight c3. So black is winning this one. And Hari Krishna will be tied with Voytasek going into the last round. So just the, oh, I think it's over actually. I think we've got it. Yep, we've just had a resignation. So Edouard has resigned, and that is it for this round. We have 2 leaders with 1 round to play after 6 rounds. Both Pentala Hari Krishna and Radoslav Voytasek, both the equal top seeds, though in the world rankings, Hari Krishna is 2 places ahead. So we will definitely see an interesting last round. Hari Krishna now has his fate in his hands. He knew that Studer was playing against Voytasek in the last round, but now I think he only has to beat Anton, not the easiest of tasks, to tie for first. So let's, I don't know what the tiebreaker is here, if this tournament is being run as a tiebreaker for a tiebreaker, but we'll take a break and we'll get back to the games quite soon. So see you all very soon.
again. Move them more again.
Welcome back. My name's Ian Rogers, and I'm bringing you the final round of the CHESS960 tournament from the Biel International Chess Festival, the first high-level event, international event to be held since the coronavirus crisis hit. And we have two leaders on 4.5 out of 6, and they are Radoslav Voytasek and Pentala Hari Krishna. So these games are, well, crucial only for tie-breaking purposes, although the difference between first and second prize is 1,000 Swiss francs, which is not nothing, but we shall see how they go. So let's have a look at perhaps Mr. Voytasek's game. Although, have they started yet? It looks like they're still looking at the positions. Yep. Oh no, they've just begun. So we've got Studer, who has scored 0 points so far, up against the tournament leader. Could this be the moment for the Swiss player to break through? Now, f4 and knight c3 is a very unusual opening in this position. It's the nearest thing you can get to a normal position with the whole queenside. Okay, obviously they set their king and queens up the wrong way around, but and the king side a little bit, but both e4 and d4 have scored very well for white in these positions. Knight c3 was actually b3 was played by Ian Nepomniachtchi a few years ago against Levon Aronian from this position, and after g6 he sort of regretted it almost immediately. He lost the game very quickly, though the opening wasn't totally to blame. Here we have what's called a Grand Prix attack against the Sicilian. It's just a bit weird on the king side, but white's rook already being on f1 is not bad. So a closed Sicilian, with you often put a bishop on g2, so h1 is not such a big difference. You'll play knight f3, and you can probably play queen h4 and attack. The only problem is that the black king is not going to be over on the king side. But the h-pawn is undefended, and white does have some initiative for attacking it. So I think knight f3, bishop g4, queen h4 just looks like a good idea here. Sure, black will get the d4 square, but it's not permanent. So white may be thinking about something else, like playing, I don't know, g3 and answering bishop check with bishop f3, which is decent, but g3 might allow knight d4, and then you might regret it. So it's also possible to play like a close Sicilian, d4, d3, bishop e3, castles queenside. The only problem is you usually have to be crazy to castle queenside in a close Sicilian. So yeah, already Studer is thinking, and I reckon he may do so for a little while longer. So I guess the other big game here is Hari Krishna against Anton, and this is a game which looks much more like a CHESS960 game than a normal game, I must admit. So, by the way, I don't like his position very much, but okay. It looks to me as if Hari Krishna is playing to move his queen and then castle kingside with a very, very normal position. One where he may be able to later play c4 and actually stand quite well. I don't suppose black really wants to castle queenside, although you could play bishop g4 and queen d7 and castle queenside, and that also looks like a funny sort of position that you can get in normal games. So these two are close to playing a normal game of chess, and well, they're both very strong players, and so bishop f5 looks reasonable, but we can always tell it to go away with knight h4. I don't know if I want to. Is knight b4 a problem? Usually not, because of knight a3, though here perhaps queen a4 could be a pest. So yeah, this bishop f5 may have some sort of threat. Certainly if white wants to go queenside around here, the bishop on f5 will be good. That's why I'm very tempted to say go, oh, knight h4, maybe the d4 pawn was hanging though. Okay, so there was, okay, the queen covered knight b4 anyway, so there was no knight b4 for a while. Queen c3 looks weird, but the idea is knight e4 to just go to b3, attack a few pawns, especially the d5 one with check, and of course clear the way for castling on the king side. And that does look fine. So I suspect something like queen d7 is just sensible play here. Getting ready perhaps to castle kingside anyway. Believe it or not, white's already spent a move on bishop g2. So the bishop was on h1. It looks like it went from f1 to g2, but it went h1 to g2. We're getting something very, very close to normal. And, well, not normal boring. I mean, those positions are not easy to play, but certainly I reckon it's, okay, it's doing, well, it's going to be a long, tough game, put it that way. And Hari Krishna knows he's got a big job beating Anton, while Voytasek, in theory, has a much easier job beating Studer. And of course, waiting in the wing. So we'll go to Keymer's game, and that one, let's see, is wide open, unlike the other ones. So white has gone for the big e4 advance, and black just took it and put a bishop on d5. Well, you'd like to go bishop d3 in order to play c4, but unfortunately in this weird position, there is in fact bishop g2 picking up some material. And if you go knight f3 here, we might just swap bishops and play queen d5, because if you take on a7, we take on a2. Sorry, h7, we take on a2. So white needs a developing move, but doesn't really want to allow bishop takes and queen d5. So I wonder if king b1 is just sensible here for Keymer, leaving that bishop there for a little while longer. You can play bishop c4, but luckily we've got bishop d3, and queen takes pawn on d4 looks ridiculous then. Yep, you're walking into all sorts of pins. I wonder if black should castle kingside around here soon too. So this is almost like a Caro-Kann, one where white's trying to use development advantage but hasn't quite succeeded, and, well, not yet, but black's pieces should be able to get to decent squares. The bishop on h1 does come out pretty easily with g6, so I'm not too worried by that. But yeah, I think it's going to be opposite coloured castling. Sorry, opposite side castling. Knight f3 played. So take, queen d5. Yep, and well, you could start with g6. No, you couldn't. d5 is going to kill you. You've got to go queen d5 here, I reckon. Oh, and you haven't even got queen h7 because of queen f3 after knight f3. So if you swap, we get c6 for the knight. Absolutely equal, I reckon. Edouard's doing fine. So that's no problems at all. Perhaps we should go back to the Studer game and see how he's doing. Noel Studer. And let's see. It's the H pawn again, isn't it? So you'd sort of like to go knight f6 here, but there's a real danger of take, bishop g5, and you probably are losing your H pawn anyway. You're losing much more than that. So it looks like bishop f6 needs to be played, and I'm guessing we can steal that pawn on h7, although I've got to be careful because there is no way back after that. But maybe for black there's no way forward either. I don't know, there is no... So bishop f6, queen h7, knight e7, threatening rook h8. He's done it. So knight g5 looks a bit weird. Very weird. So queen takes knight e7. And is there a way out? Maybe not. Maybe we can play some way to get lots of compensation, but even that I'm struggling to see at the moment. So perhaps Voytasek has calculated this better than Studer. Studer's used up a crazy amount of time for only move 7. And yeah, you get the feeling he wants to take on h7 and will find some tricky way to justify it. So if you take on h7 and take on e5, no, he hasn't. Just went queen back, and black should be pretty comfortable here. Maybe some small problems on the f line, but I don't see them. Black can castle queenside now. Looks absolutely fine. And that queen on g3 doesn't help the bishop on h1 at all. Somehow, coordination, the sort of thing you want to do in normal chess, is just as important in and harder to do in CHESS960. And I think unless white actually wins something, then black's position looks really pretty good. So yeah, castle's queenside. Probably not threatening much, but in some positions perhaps you can take on f4 and play d5 and break out, but I'm not completely trusting that. Anyway, it'd be nice to have the d6 pawn protected. So castle's queenside does achieve that. So Studer is definitely a little bit worse. Long way to go, of course, but he's sort of playing without his bishop on h1. And I reckon he probably should have pulled his head in and gone back to f2 here. It would also have left some options of g4. So pretending that when you're opening up for your bishop, you're also attacking. And so let us see the other co-leader. That is Pentala Hari Krishna. And he and we'll just see that one. So we saw that weird maneuver by Hari Krishna putting his queen on c3, and he definitely has castled kingside knight e4. So I guess his idea is if queen b3, now that he's castled, he can just grab the pawn on d4. To be honest, it looks crazily risky, but it may be tactically playable. We also have things like Queen A3 here, and that feels a bit better because it's nice to tie him down to the A7 pawn. We can also play C4 or Knight C3. Quite like Knight C3. And remember, there could be a problem on C7 in some positions. So yeah, Queen A3 looks necessary. Queen E3 is possible, but it's just awkward. I don't trust it at all. So it's very weird that he's thinking about Queen A3 because it's just a decent, healthy move. Oh, he's worried. Oh, Knight takes D4. Take. Bishop takes, protects A7. And if you take on A7 immediately, there's a Knight E2 and Knight F4. And then I'm not at all sure you've got a good attack there. So he decided to hang on to his pawn with Queen E3. So now there's things like F6 and E5, which could be good. There's King B8, of course. Queen D7 looks pretty normal as well. Hard to see why this shouldn't be absolutely fine for black. So Knight takes D4 immediately doesn't work because after Knight takes E5 we can take on F5. And then if you take on F4 we're going to take on A7, I guess. And that should be okay. So no tactics for black. Knight B4 is pointless because of, well, Knight A3 for one, if you don't need something better. So probably there's no easy way to exploit that queen. I think King B8 makes a lot of sense because in all the tactics, the pawn on A7 won't be hanging. So they've both still got plenty of time left. But yeah, it's hard to find a plan here though. Black's plan of F6 and E5 is probably more dangerous than anything that White can come up with. Maybe White will have to go C4, but I'm struggling to see. Oh yeah, well, you probably have to and break up the protection of the knight on E4 and try and create some possibilities there. Well, Black's knight can drop back to D6, but doesn't seem to be that great. Okay, F6 played. So is he going to start with bishop H6? That makes a lot of sense. To gain a tempo and then play C4. Now that the D pawn is not under attack, of course, you can throw Queen A3 in and answer E5 with bishop E3, and that looks actually remarkably solid. The bishop, yeah, F6 has turned the bishop on H8 into a really poor piece. So as long as White doesn't swap on E5, it should be okay. So yeah, I really like Queen A3 now, and somehow I feel like E5, bishop E3, and the tactics could easily favour Hari Krishna, but he went for the C4 plan. So if we take it, I presume knight H4 or similar is coming to try and undermine the knight. But you may as well take it. E5, I guess it's possible. Take, or bishop H6 first. Yeah, bishop H6 first after E5. And things are still a bit messy for black. It is harder to maintain that pawn on D4, but it still feels like it's okay. So all in all, our final round is an almost normal position. Not quite, but really remarkably close to a normal opening. And of course, if the three pieces on the queen side start in normal positions, and you can castle even though your king's on D8, then it's likely it's going to turn out like this. So Hari Krishna and Anton, it's messy. So he's trying to win a whole piece now with G5. Can he do it? So if we take on d5, you take on f4, we take back, you take with the rook on d5, protecting the bishop on f5, and we throw knight h4 at you, and that feels like it might be winning. Or winning material, or I don't know. It might be. It's, well, if Hare Krishna is going to go c4 and not queen a3, then I presume he's calculated this properly. Let's have a quick look now. Oh, hasn't calculated it properly. He just wants to get some material for his bishop. He's just gambling now. So king takes, we take on d5. You don't have to take back, but there isn't a good square for that knight. If you take back, then knight d2. No, then knight d2, maybe we can play rook d4. So rook takes d5, and white needs to exploit that pin somehow, but it's not so simple, because the d4 pawn is constantly hanging. So I think rook takes, and knight c3 doesn't do the trick, I don't think. It's the knight on e4 is the unstable piece that you really want to use. You want to pin in some way, or so rook takes pawn knight e1, and then rook takes d4 knight c2. I wonder if that could possibly work. It's not impossible, but we do need to move our knight away from f3 to make anything work. Knight d2 played. So knight takes knight, bishop takes rook, knight takes rook, king takes. What is the problem? He's just taking back. Okay, if rook takes d4, we can take on c6. That bit's okay. So when the rook moves, he just wants to go d5. And he argues the bishop on h8 is so bad that you've got plenty of compensation for the piece. This is a nice idea. However, you are so far down in material that we can simply protect the rook on d5. So queen d7, or maybe even e6. e6 I don't mind, actually. Give back a little bit of material, but mobilize your pieces. So yeah, so e6 looks sensible. White will have one pawn. Yep, played one pawn and a rook. Hang on. White will have one pawn and a rook for 2 pieces, which is usually not enough in a middle game, especially if the kings are safe. You usually need 2 pawns to really make it work. Here, I'm not totally sure the black king's safe, but it's certainly not in grave danger. So, is there any other sort of danger? So, rook d4 is simply impossible. Bishop c6, unfortunately. Is that absolutely true? Yes, it is. So we still have one more move if we don't want to take the rook. And it could be a rook to c1, which is really tempting. And then with the idea, if the rook moves back, you throw d5 in, and then you take the pawn on a7. Although whether that's really enough is another question as well. But bishop takes rook is not much. So if Hare Krishna thinks he's going to win this after bishop takes d5, he could be having a problem. So let's go back to the game between Studer and Voytasek, the other leader. It is weird. So we saw white go back to g3. Well, he went back to h4 again. And now fe5, he's played g5. He wants to just recapture. And I guess Studer wants to be a genius and take on f6 round here and give up the piece for the queen. No, he just went queen e1. So pawn takes. So a lot of space here for black, but yeah, if there's no bishop takes g5, then it's probably okay. It looks like both players are about to castle queenside, and that bishop on h1 is again a real problem, but maybe white can just play g4 at some point. So knight e7. Are we really going to go c4 here and give away lots of squares? If you don't, there's a danger that there'll be an a2 pawn problem with knight b4 at some point. So, yeah, I think c4, maybe you walk into a b5 move sooner or later. Though, probably the only safe spot for black's king is probably on the queen side, so b5 is unlikely to come so quickly. So c4 played by Studer. And well, you can't take with the knight on d5, and do you want to give up your bishop for that? Well, you can always jump in on d4 and then take with the knight on d5, but I think you've got better things to do. So castle's queenside, king b8. Is white going to play b4 is the other question. It doesn't look like that strong an attack, to be honest. Yeah, your kingside pieces don't seem to be participating at all. So is there any trick here? Some knight g5 at some point? Probably not. So no, black should get out of the middle. But whether black's really better here is another question. So it's this could be Studer's big moment. So let's go back to the Hare Krishna game, because that certainly is for black, but the rook stuck on d5 trying to stop a pawn advance. So now b4's been played, and the idea is if the threat is bishop takes rook followed by b5. So you actually have to worry about b5. So king b8 played. And a big decision for Hare Krishna. Does he just go e3 and say, okay, I'm a piece down, but I'll have a real attack? Or does he grab the rook at last? If you grab the rook, your white squares around your king could be a bit of a problem. Maybe not a huge one. So I wish if you take the rook, though, also your knight doesn't really get into the game. There are moves like knight b3 with the idea of knight c5 and maybe some sacrifice on b7 at some point. So knight b3 certainly looks exciting. And I reckon, Hare Krishna just has to start gambling really and make sure that he keeps attacking. Well, right now black is also thinking about f5 though, and that will make the bishop on g6 pretty bad, but it'll make the bishop on h8 alive for the first time. So knight b3 played. If the rook comes back, then there'll be knight c5, and the idea will be to go to, well, hang on, knight c5, then you've lost your d4 pawn, so it's not so easy. Yeah, so rook d8 maybe does make sense. There is a b5 move, and that would force you to go to e7, but that does enable you to go to d5 later. So really, really hard to know what Hare Krishna's got for this piece after rook back to d8. Maybe your rook goes to c1 anyway, and only after f5 do you play e3. Just a reminder, by the way, that the reason I'm not moving any pieces around is because I can't. The software is not working with CHESS960 positions, and there's no analysis possible, unfortunately. So knight e7 played. He didn't even wait for b5. And yeah, that is a good square for the knight. But of course, is it permanent? If after bishop takes rook here, well, knight takes gains time, so white won't have time to go e4 and knock the knight around, because the queen will have to save itself first. You can take and go queen c5. Keep an eye on that rook on f8, but I suspect a simple move like rook f7 could be good then. The queen's on a square the knight wants to go to. So Anton wants white to take on d5, and Pentala is absolutely refusing to do that. Yeah, it's certainly a better practical chance. If you swap off your big attacking bishop, then who knows what the position is, but it's probably not a queenside attack for white. Now, I wonder if white can throw e4 in some positions like this. Okay, knight c5 has some threats, e6 in particular. And you can't play rook d6 because b7 is weak. So now that the pressure is off the pawn on d4, white wants to take on e6. You can't play bishop f5 because e4 hurts. And this is beginning to look a bit better. Queen c8, I guess, is a possibility, but we can just put a rook on c1, and that could also cause some problems. Although then you have b6, and we go knight a6 check, and it's a mess. A complete mess. Yeah, still very hard to know what's going on. Which means that in a 15-minute game with only 5-second increments, there's definitely, okay, queen c8 played. So rook, probably rook a c1 played. And now b6 is answered by knight a6 check. Remember the knight on e7 will be hanging at the end of it all. We're not actually threatening knight a6 at the moment, but we are threatening to move our queen to some square like e3 with a knight a6 to check, and also a okay, b6 played. He's not worried about knight a6. Wow. So okay, we have to check on a6, don't we? I guess e4 is a bit aggressive, but it doesn't do much if the rook goes back. Or are we planning to give away another piece? I don't believe that, though. So knight a6, queen takes, queen c7, king moves, and queen takes on e7, and the rook on d5 is completely pinned then, which could be a real problem. And if you leave the back rank, then the bishop on h8, which is bad, might actually just disappear from the board. But I don't understand why Hare Krishna hasn't played knight a6 yet. Is it king b7? But after king b7, we can actually switch and go queen a3, and then suddenly rook c7 is coming. So this is weird. Or unless Hare Krishna can't believe his luck. Is there any defense there? I guess you could take the knight. Yep, go into the corner, e7, and you can't double rooks. Where can you put your rook on f8? g8 maybe? No, but then queen e6 wins. No, this is. Oh, you've got rook e8. Okay. So check, king in the corner. Queen takes, rook e8. But after rook e8, we can go queen d7, for example. And all sorts of things are happening. So, yeah, queen d7 looks pretty good. Do you have queen d6? I don't see the point. Is there anything else spectacular here for white? Probably not. So, yeah, just going to d7 and getting ready to bring your rook in on the 7th. Looks pretty good. Hare Krishna hasn't moved, and yet he would have seen this position when he played knight a6 check. I don't quite understand. I don't want to go to c7 because it blocks my rook from coming in. I want to use the pin. And here, yeah, it's very strange. Just an update on the Voytasek game. Voytasek seems to be taking over against Studer. He has won a pawn. So queen d7 played by Hare Krishna. And that is certainly a very, very annoying move. So, yeah, it's a real hassle. So f5 played. Finally, he's going to get his bishop out, but let's see. e3, of course, is possible. Rook c7 doesn't threaten anything, so maybe... So he takes. He wants queen d5 with check, does he? What's the idea? Queen b7. Oh, queen b7, rook c7. Very nasty. So you've got to stay on the a file. Oh, but then rook c8, mate. So it's game over. And Hare Krishna is going to beat Anton. Queen b7, rook c7. You've only got one square to run away to. And then queen c6 check his mate. So Anton is losing and Hare Krishna will finish at least equal first. He now has to rely on Noel Studer, the local player who has yet to get a point, to somehow hang on and beat or draw with Voytasek. Well, unfortunately for Studer, he's down a pawn at the moment. We'll go to that game. Yes, he has resigned. So let us go to the... so he recovers from a pretty bad start to the tournament. Vincent Keymer has beaten Romain Edouard. So all that's left is Studer and Voytasek. Last game going. Here, well, White's got a c6 square, but by itself it doesn't do too much. So Black just keeps pushing. At any moment, Black can go knight b4. In fact, he's probably going to do it anyway, or is he going to go knight d4? I think knight b4. Take back with the a pawn, invade with the rook. Looks really, really good. Nope. He just took on e3. Is that because he wants to go c4? No, he wants to go a4. I don't know. Okay, this is nearly game over, so it is going to be a tie for first, I'd say. Okay, queen there with no threats at the moment. So rook a3, there's a knight c4 coming. Queen f3, there's still a knight c4 coming, followed by rook check, followed by knight d2. Oh, just played c4 instead. Well, we can take and go knight c4 now if we want. He's setting up knight c5, he's setting up knight b2, and now he's going to get that. So knight takes d3 check, I guess. Rook takes doesn't look bad either, but rook takes has been played. So queen e2, and then why have we done this? It's hard to know because b5 is a bit of a hassle now. Knight a4, no, rook takes, knight c3, check. Is Voytasek losing control of this a little? He could have had knight takes d3 with check in a pretty easy position. Instead, White's got, well, the semblance of a series of tricks. Okay, knight check. You didn't have to go there. You could have gone king e1 to keep it confusing. So c3. Okay, so White has to achieve something over on the king side. And is rook d8 a good start or not? And it could be, although he can reply with c3. But this is nasty. I just took. Well, hang on. Is this going to be winning? Isn't there a perpetual check with queen f7 or something like that, or is he going to reply with knight e3? But then we go knight e6. Ooh. It's super close to being absolutely fine for White. Could this be Studer's big moment? Knight e6 played first. So pawn equals queen, I guess, and queen f7. Or does he start? Oh, no. Yep, queen f7 is necessary. Okay. So lots of discovered checks. If you go to e3, I don't see anything much. You certainly, you've got knight f1 if you want. But this could be better for White. Bishop takes, rook check, bishop back again. You have to check again. You have to take, and we have, oh, you have queen c2, and that will get a perpetual because we can't bring our queen back in. Can we? Oh, king here. Is this game over? Fantastic. Noel Studer. Pentala Hari Krishna owes him a drink tonight. He scores the only point in the tournament against the tournament leader. Incredible fight back by Studer, really. I mean, he was in horrible trouble. And of course, he'd lost 6 games, so you'd be entitled to be demoralised. But he finally gets his first point, and that's really just a great little achievement. It shows that he can play well. You know, he's been the most ambitious Swiss player that I've seen for a while. He really wants to turn into a top 10 player, and people have said it's sort of unlikely, and he accepts that it's unlikely, but he still wants to try for it. And now, well, he's in fact, poor old Voytasek has finished in 3rd place because Keymer won. That's a bit sad for the player that's led the tournament the whole way. So the final scores of the CHESS960 tournament, the first event of the Biel Chess Festival, the first event for an international elite tournament for a long, long time, has been won by Pentala Hari Krishna on 5.5 out of 7. Vincent Keymer was second, the 15-year-old. From Germany, he got 5 out of 7. Radoslav Voytasek got 3.5, and then we had a number of players who finished on 50%. Michael Adams, after a horrible start, got to 3.5 out of 7, and Alexander Donchenko, the last-minute replacement, remembering that Salah from the UAE should have been here. He had to pull out. Well, basically the airline refused to fly him to Switzerland for unclear reasons. He's been replaced by Arkady Naiditsch, but Naiditsch couldn't make it today. So Alexander Donchenko came in at the very last minute and finished on 50%, most decent score. David Anton will be disappointed with his 3 out of 7. Romain Edouard as well with his 2 out of 7. And Noel Studer, 1 out of 7, but what a one it was. And that's really why you like chess. It can upsets are always possible, and it just takes 1 or 2 stupid moves. Voytasek got a bit careless, but he thought his c-pawn would win it for him. Bishop f1 was King h1 was just the move he overlooked, and it's game over. So, well, yeah, well done to Hari Krishna. He gets €2,000. 1,000 goes to Vincent Keymer. That's pretty well all we've got for you tonight. Tomorrow we will have the rapid tournament. It will be 7 rounds of rapid chess, starting half an hour earlier than today, starting at 1 o'clock. And those rapid games will be worth 2 points for a win and 1 point for a draw. Whereas the day after, when they begin the classical tournament, wins will be worth 3, draws 1.5. So it's still better to be good at classical chess. Halfway through the tournament, there will be a 14-round blitz tournament with wins worth 1 and draws worth 0.5. And so they will be basically equivalent to the rapid tournament in value. Then we finish the 7 rounds of the main event. And the main event is the first classical international tournament since the candidates stopped, at least high-level event. We have had, I believe, a first Saturday event already. But thanks for watching today. I know a lot of people don't like CHESS960. Some are absolutely addicted to it. Some regard it as the only good form of the game. But certainly we got a lot of excitement here today, especially in the last round. And I hope that will continue for the rest of the event. Anyway, I look forward to talking to you all tomorrow. As I say, the round starts at 1, and it will be a 7-round rapid tournament tomorrow. And the serious stuff starts on the 21st. Sorry, 20th. So see you all then, and good night.